Okay, I'm delighted to be speaking with Hugh Gyton, an old colleague of mine, and it's been a while since we've seen each other. How are you, Hugh?
I'm very well, thanks, Rod.
That's good. Now, look, the conversation today is all about difficult conversations. So, why do we get into these situations?
Well, I think one of the interesting things about conversations generally is the conversations that are going on in our head that cause us to then have trouble.
All right.
Research in Harvard, the Harvard Negotiation Project, actually put difficult conversations and conflict down to 3 conversations that we're having in our head. The conversation about what did actually happen, so you and I may actually have a different view of what actually happened.
Okay. So our recollections are completely different.
Correct, which is why obviously witnesses in court cases sometimes are a bit challenging because how we recollect things are quite different. The other conversation is how we feel. And how we feel about our feelings. Are they valid feelings? How do we feel about the other person's feelings? So we have a whole conversation going on in our head about that. And then the final one is around our whole identity in terms of, are we worried about looking silly or incompetent and our status and things? So we complicate what could possibly be quite a normal conversation with all the other clutter going on in our head.
With all the voices in our head.
All the voices.
Yes.
Yes.
I can imagine a few people nodding as we speak. So you have some tips for us, I think, that we can use.
I do. I'm a great believer that it's about the conversation climate we need to create. I find it fascinating around conversations that my observation is that we don't get very conscious about how we're having conversations. We just haven't. And we're not taught at school and at college how to have them effectively. So I thought I'd give you some input.
Okay. So conversation climate.
Conversation climate. How do we set? So the first thing is, set a conversation climate around you that minimises the chance of difficult conversations and conflict conversations. So just the culture of your workplace. Are you, as the leader of that organisation, creating a climate that encourages openness and collaboration and engagement? Or have you actually created a conversation climate where people play silly games or are too afraid to actually say things as they truly believe them? So I think that's a really important one in business.
Absolutely, yes. And it's a lot more than just an open door policy, isn't it?
It is, yes. So the 5 sort of pointers, if you like, I've summarised in the word input. So my input for you today around difficult conversations. So the I is I. How might I be contributing to the fact that this is a difficult conversation? Is it that I just have an inability to say no, so that I'm not performing in the workplace because I just keep taking on more and more and more? Therefore, I've now created an environment where there needs to be a difficult conversation between me and my colleagues. Or maybe I'm now facing a difficult conversation with my client because I've not been able to manage the expectations correctly. So I've
very
not
common
delivered.
situation.
Very common. So check in with yourself. How much of the situation you're finding yourself where you have challenging conversations is actually just down to the way that you're choosing to operate.
Let's move on to N.
N. Okay, N is now is better than later. My observation of self and people that I train and coach is once we start being aware that there is a potential difficult conversation to have, so maybe it's an employee who is not performing and we need to do some coaching with them, we procrastinate and we postpone and we're worried about having the conversation.
Vainly hoping that the problem might go away.
Hoping the conversation, let sleeping dogs lie. My experience says that when you let sleeping dogs lie, those dogs get bigger and they start foaming at the mouth. So my advice is if you start to recognise that there's a potential challenging situation, get into it quickly. I often use the phrase as well, name the elephant in the room. Sometimes we're aware that something's there and we walk around it.
Okay, let's move on to P.
P is proof. So when you are having a difficult conversation with somebody, take the emotion out of it. It shouldn't be a subjective thing. Make it an objective conversation. So what is the real evidence? Use specific examples of where, for example, your expectations of what should have been done haven't been met. Be very specific. What's the proof? So that's the P.
Okay, lovely. U.
U of input is understand. Seek first to understand them. Be open. Be empathic. So that you really understand why might they be behaving in the way they're thinking and behaving.
Are you suggesting in that sort of instance, this is planning we should do kind of before the conversation, or that we should just go into the conversation with a greater preparedness for understanding?
I think the use of input is a great way of just getting your ducks in line.
Okay.
So a bit of pre-conversation thought is always useful. You know, I'm a great believer for all of the important conversations in life. Stop and just reflect a little bit about what's the outcome you need for you and for them.
Okay.
But this thing around understanding, I think a key piece of this, Robert, though, is that doesn't necessarily mean you accept their point of view.
No, okay.
But at least be prepared to understand
why. You put yourself kind of in their shoes.
Yes, put yourself in their shoes. So
lovely.
First
Let's
to
move to
understand.
T. Thank you.
And then T is take the time. Take time to work with them to come up with a strategy moving forward that means you minimise the need to have them in the future, and you minimise the need for conversations to become difficult.
Fantastic. Well, look, talking of time, we're out of it. Hugh, thank you so much. Now, you've written a book, I know.
I
just happen to have
a copy of the book.
The Art of Conversation.
The Art of Conversation.
And if we want to find more about you, then I think we go to your website, which is?
The website is www.justaconversation.com.
Okay, thank you, Hugh. It's been very effortless talking to you today. It was a fine conversation. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks.